Decision lag is emerging as a hidden liability across sectors. Organizations are not short on warning signs. Signals tied to energy reliability, infrastructure limits, environmental exposure, and digital demand are arriving earlier and with more precision than in past cycles. Yet across sectors, outcomes suggest a widening gap between what organizations know and when they act. That gap is becoming a liability in its own right. This is no longer a question of whether risk is visible. It is a question of whether organizations are structured to respond before exposure escalates into cost, disruption, or lost flexibility. The problem is no longer risk visibility. Over the past several years, early warning capabilities have improved dramatically. Grid forecasting, climate modeling, asset monitoring, and supply chain analytics now surface constraints well before they become acute. According to the World Economic Forum, (WEF), risk detection is advancing faster than institutional response systems, particularly where infrastructure, climate, and technology pressures intersect. The challenge, increasingly, is not awareness. It is activation. Operational teams often see stress forming months or even years before formal responses are authorized. By the time decisions clear governance processes, conditions have already shifted. Why organizations hesitate even when the signal is clear. Decision lag is rarely the result of denial. More often, it is produced by structures designed for stability rather than speed. Annual budgeting cycles, layered approvals, cross-functional sign-off requirements, and capital allocation frameworks optimized for predictable conditions. McKinsey's research on organizational effectiveness shows that execution risk in complex, capital-intensive environments is increasingly driven by internal friction, such as decision bottlenecks and approval layers, rather than a lack of information or risk awareness. What once functioned as discipline is becoming drag. Delay carries its own risk profile. Financial markets are beginning to reflect this reality, even if indirectly. S&P Global Ratings has expanded its focus on operational resilience, infrastructure readiness, and exposure management when assessing long-term credit outlooks. While not framed explicitly as decision lag, the implication is clear. Organizations that respond slowly to known constraints face higher long-term risk. In effect, timing is being priced. This marks a subtle but important shift. Risk is no longer judged solely by exposure or compliance status, but by an organization's demonstrated ability to respond before stress becomes structural. What faster response looks like in practice. A small but growing group of organizations is beginning to shorten decision cycles by redefining how action is triggered. Rather than waiting for annual reviews or finalized regulatory clarity, these companies rely on predefined thresholds, allowing conditional action once certain signals are crossed. Energy and infrastructure-focused firms such as Schneider Electric have emphasized embedding scenario analysis directly into operational planning, enabling earlier response to grid constraints, cost volatility, or reliability risks. In the renewable sector, Ørsted has demonstrated a willingness to reprice or exit projects early when assumptions no longer hold, containing exposure rather than extending it in pursuit of certainty. These examples are not about speed for its own sake. They are about preserving optionality. Why this matters now. The convergence of infrastructure strain, climate exposure, and digital demand is compressing timelines across sectors. Facilities teams are encountering constraints earlier than expected. Energy procurement assumptions are being tested in real time. Compliance obligations are evolving faster than capital plans can adjust. In this environment, delay is no longer neutral. It narrows future choices and raises downstream costs. The strategic question for 2026. As early year assumptions collide with operational reality, leaders face a different kind of risk calculus. The question is no longer whether organizations can identify emerging threats, but whether they can act while flexibility still exists. In 2026, the hidden liability is not uncertainty. It is waiting too long to respond to what is already known. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.